You've clicked on this video because there is more to you than you are now. You know that there is something, a life that you can live that you are not living now. There's a part of you that wants growth, that wants to become, yet you keep finding yourself with the same little self-sabotaging habits and vices and the same low living frequency. Things in your life just aren't the way that you want them to be. Maybe you are successful in some certain areas, but still there is this nagging feeling that something just isn't right, that something is missing, that something is lacking. And discipline isn't going to solve this problem, because most of the guys that watch this video, most of the guys that have reached some sort of success in their life, they are actually pretty disciplined. So that is not the issue. The issue that you have is a self-respect and a standard problem, which creates a double life. Because there is a version of you that knows exactly what he needs to do. Waking up early, staying consistent, not drinking, not taking drugs, not watching porn, not smoking, not lashing out to your girlfriend, staying consistent, training, taking care of your physique. That version of you knows exactly what he needs to do. And then there is a version of you, the version that doesn't, the version that sticks to it for maybe a couple days, maybe a couple weeks, but always falls back into the same old patterns. And that gap is slowly destroying your confidence. Because every day that you do not follow through, every time that you stick to it for 3-4 days, maybe 3-4 weeks, but then fall back into old patterns, you tell yourself that you can't follow through and that you cannot trust yourself. This is a self-respect problem which is rooted in standards, but the thing that makes it really, really a problem, this is the thing that makes it a cycle, that makes it a pattern that we are stuck in, is that you are dishonest. You're not truthful. You're making up stories for your own fucking bullshit. And that is something way harder to fix, but that is exactly what I want to talk about in this video. In this video, I'm going to give you the tools that are going to change your entire perspective on identity change. I'm going to give you something that once you hear everything that I've said in this video and you implement it into your own life, there is no way back. I guarantee that there is something that's going to change inside of you that doesn't allow you to go back to the same old bullshit that you've been stuck in for this whole time. Now guys, if you don't know me, my name is Jesse and I have a healthy obsession with becoming the best version of myself, because about 8 months ago, I hit rock bottom. I used to have a 7-figure business making anywhere between 60 to 150 grand a month. I had a Porsche, I had a penthouse, but I lost it all. I hit rock bottom. Why? Because I had an identity that wasn't wired for success. I had an identity that was self-sabotaging, and I had stupid behavior, and I completely broke everything down, and it led me to a very important question. What would my life look like if I just made the right decisions? Why am I like this? Why did this happen? And since those 8 months, I've gone on this epic journey of self-mastery, discovering every single part of myself and how to improve every single aspect of my life. And I've been sharing everything that I've learned and am learning still on this YouTube channel. So let's get into it. I have put a lot of thought in this video. I've put a lot of thought in this work, and I've come to a certain conclusion. I'm going to give you the answers to your misery, to the fact that you are not the person that you want to become, because you know that you could be someone else, yet you always fall back into the same old pattern. So why is it this? You've probably been stuck in this loop for longer than you'd like to admit, but the behavior isn't even the worst part. The worst part is the story, the narrative that you tell yourself, the justification that you come up with for your bullshit, for your low-level standards, for your bad habits and your vices, for the outcomes that you currently have in your life. So you might look great from the outside, successful, put together, and you might be working on yourself, you might be doing this during the week, but then there is another version of you that comes out when no one else is watching, the version of you that exists in private, the version that drinks too much because he says he's earned it, the version that does reckless spending, the version that watches porn when no one else is watching, the version that smokes a cigarette every now and then because he thinks it helps him with his stress levels, the version of you that lashes out to his girlfriend because he's stressed because of all the work that he's been taking on lately, the version of you that eats a bunch of fucking bullshit every night and watches Netflix because he can't really control himself, or because he goes to the gym anyway so he can kind of do it. And deep down you know that you shouldn't be doing these things. Deep down you know that you want to live in alignment with the person that you want to be. And the thing that keeps this whole identity of yours alive is the story that we tell ourselves. It is the narrative that we create about all of these things that we do. It's the justification that we give ourselves to do the bad things in our lives. And we're so good at this. Your brain is so absolutely good at this, giving you these explanations that it almost makes sense. And these stories are convincing, and that is exactly what the problem is. And you tell yourself you will change. You tell yourself that this week will be different. You tell yourself that this time will be the last time. But no matter how much time passes, you will find yourself exactly at the same place with the same old habits, the same old routines, the same old fears, the same old thoughts, the same old patterns. Still scrolling, still procrastinating, still overeating, still not fully happy. So what is it that is actually stopping you from becoming the version of you that you know you should become? Well, it's not your circumstances, it's not your past, it's not people around you, it's not your environment, but it is your own standards. See, everything in your life, everything is just simply a reflection of what you tolerate. Your confidence, your discipline, your physique, your relationships, your happiness, your financial situation, every single thing is just simply a byproduct of what you tolerate. And again, the worst thing isn't even the fact that you tolerate it. The worst thing is that you create stories as to why you tolerate it. And this is the problem that you need to understand. This is the reason why I've been repeating this message throughout the video, is because the stories that you tell yourself, I cannot stress this enough. I'll give you an example. I know a guy here in Medellin who constantly talks about the things that he wants to do, about the great ideas that he has, about he knows exactly what to do, and then he does it for 1 day, 2 days, but then he immediately goes back to old patterns. He immediately quits. He immediately falls back. So one of the things that he was supposed to do was wake up early every single day at 6 a.m. He told me, I'm going to do that. He did it for like 2 fucking days before falling back into old patterns and then just making up a story. Yeah, but I'll work until later at night. Very good explanation, right? But you can't even keep your fucking word. And this is the problem, because every single time that you do this, you cast a vote to keep the old identity in place. You reaffirm this old identity that doesn't even make you happy. So it doesn't make sense. You say you want a physique, you go to the gym for a week, but then you stop. Or you say you want a physique and maybe you go to the gym regularly, but you cannot control what you put in your mouth. You say you want discipline, you wake up early for 3 days, but then something happens and you quit and you make up some elaborate story as to why you can't do it. You say you want to build the business in a certain way, but you avoid the opportunities that actually get it there. This cycle, this is your standard. Your standard is that you keep falling back. You keep sabotaging yourself. You keep going back to what is comfortable and what is familiar. So why are you stuck in these standards? Why is this a part of your life? Why does this seem to govern your life? Even though you want something different consciously, why does this subconsciously seem to always pull you back? It is because your current life matches the identity that you have. The low standards that you have right now, they feel familiar. They feel safe. They don't require you to change who you are. Because the moment that you raise your standards, it forces you to become someone anew. And that is something that your subconscious, your nervous system, your brain doesn't really like, because that means unknown. And that is something that your brain isn't wired for. Your brain is wired to keep you safe, to keep you comfortable, to keep you in a thing that feels familiar. And most people, they don't change not because they're not capable, but because they decide not to let go of who they are. So what does it actually mean to raise your standards? What would it actually do for you if you do it? This is the way that I see it. Raising your standards is a tool to change your identity. Because raising your standards is not about motivation, but it's about decisions. It's about deciding to not miss a workout. It's about deciding to not lie to yourself. It's about deciding to stay calm under pressure. It's about deciding to eat healthy. Not just sometimes, but all the time. Because standards are not what you want, but they are things that you accept. I'll give you an exercise that will cut through all the bullshit, show you exactly what you're living on right now and what your future version can be. But before I do that, we have to dive into why raising your standards is important on a neuroscience level and on a nervous system level. Because here's what people don't really understand when we talk about standards. I don't want you to look at standards as goals, because your brain doesn't work on goals. Your brain works on standards. And standard is a pattern, and your brain aims for patterns. It doesn't care what you say you wanted. You can say the same thing every single fucking day, but it cares about what you actually do. It cares about what you actually accept as normal, because that is what it protects. That is what it keeps recreating. So what I've discovered is that your standards, they actually function as a sort of guideline. Okay, this is why I use standards as a tool to create identity change, to shift my identity into a higher frequency, into a better version of myself. Because standards, they tell you what is okay, what to expect, what to return to when things go sideways. So they become a sort of foundation in your life. And this is where it becomes interesting, because if you, for example, have accepted lying as a standard into your life, then your brain will protect that as well. It will manufacture a justification before you even know that you need one, because this is what your brain is wired to do. And this is something that happens subconsciously. You don't even think about this. It just happens. Why is standards the best tool to change your identity? Because standards function as something tangible. Identity change isn't tangible. Identity change, shifting your identity, becoming the best version of yourself, it's not an easy process, and it's not really measurable. You can't really measure identity change necessarily. But what you can measure is standards, because once you create strong standards based on strong values, which we'll go over in a bit, that creates a foundation, that creates structure, and that structure and that foundation creates direction. And once we have direction, it becomes much easier for our brains and for ourselves just to follow that direction. One of the reasons why most people fail is because they don't have direction. They don't really understand where they are going, and then your brain is going to tell you, why are we going through this discomfort if we can just do this? And your brain is it has a superpower. It is extremely good at convincing yourself not to do the hard thing and to instead choose the easy thing. And you're always going to lose from your brain, the story that your brain is telling you. It's extremely elaborate, and it's extremely smart at creating stories for you to convince you to choose the comfortable thing. So strong standards created from strong values create habit, routine, and direction, which is very important if you want to change yourself. I've created 2 ways that will guarantee to gain clarity on what your current standards are and how to implement new, higher standards that will raise your frequency of living, that will make you become the best version of yourself. So this is what I've implemented after losing everything, guys. You have to understand that these are not just exercises that I've kind of just pulled out of nowhere. I've done the inner work. These are exercises that have helped me massively to understand what I needed to do, because that is the most important thing. We need to understand what we need to do, and we need to tangibly be able to follow some plan. We need to have a certain direction, and these 2 exercises, these 2 questions basically really help me with that. Now, the first thing that you need to do is you need to become extremely aware of your low-level standards, and you do this by simply asking one critical question, and that is, what am I tolerating now that my future best version of myself would never ever tolerate? That is a very important question. I want you to sit down, write that question on a piece of paper in a notebook, and I want you to really make a good audit of every single thing that your future version would look at and be like, really? What the fuck, bro? I would be disgusted with that. I want you to make this intense, because I want you to create an emotion, a feeling that is attached to you being an observer from your future perspective to who you are now, because that is what's going to create a certain pull and a certain drive to become that person, okay? Because once you become aware of all of those things, it will become increasingly more difficult to do them without feeling like shit, okay? And that is what I want you to do, because the stories that you're going to tell yourself are not going to hold any more value. Now, be aware, this is not something, once you've done it, that you immediately quit with everything, but you become aware of everything, okay? You will still have your vices and your things, but it will become less and less over time. So a really good way to look at these things is just look at every single area of your life. Your physique, your finances, your relationships, but also I divide them up into separate categories. So you have your physical standards, you have your financial standards, you have your relationship standards, and you have your spiritual standards. And spiritual standards include things like integrity. Are you actually honest with yourself? Where are you lying? Where are you not the guy that you know you should be, right? Internally, when no one else is watching. What things are you doing? What standards are you living on right now that your future version would never fucking live on, right? I want you to write all of that down and make it very clear for yourself. The most important one, which is something that I had to figure out, and which is something that I see in most men who are in some capacity successful, is they are still dishonest with themselves, which is a standard for them. Like if you've been repeating the same standard for, the past 5, 10, or maybe 15 years, you will have to do some digging. So this is an exercise that you will have to come back to every single week, every single 2 weeks, or maybe every single month. And I would advise you to do that because you will find new things in your life, new standards that you've accepted, that you've tolerated, that you will figure out along the way. You won't probably figure out all of them in your first session. So that's why I'd recommend take one session every week to reflect on that, to see those things. Catch yourself in low standards in the act. It's okay, but then catch yourself. Becoming aware is the most important thing. Remember that. The second exercise is create new standards. And the funny thing is that you usually already know what those standards are, but we've never really looked at it. Everyone teaches you to write down goals. What do I want? And I am statements. But no one focuses on standards. And there's a very big difference between standards and goals, because standards are a way of living. Goals are simply a temporary or a singular achievement. Goals disappear. You set one goal, then it moves to the next. A standard of living is something that you can keep. It's sustainable. It's something that you can always fall back to. It's a guideline for your life, basically, right? And we need those guidelines. Total freedom in no sense of the world has ever worked. You need to restrict yourself in certain ways, and actually that gives you more freedom. It's a weird contradiction, but it works that way. So you need to figure out, what are the standards that I want to live on? What are the standards of my future best version of myself? So you need to look at the future best version of yourself, and you're going to write down all of the standards that he's living on, physically, mentally, spiritually, with relationships, with business, with money. All of these things are very important to write down, because these two things, once you know what your standards are that you live on, and once you know the standards that you want to get, the future version of yourself, your brain will automatically, your nervous system will automatically calibrate to those new standards. All right, that's what we want to do. This doesn't happen overnight. This takes time. This takes at least 3 months to actually complete, to calibrate to new levels of to new standards. So again, I want you to become very, very, very clear on these standards. And then there is one extremely, extremely important thing that most people forget, but this is where we do some subconscious programming. This is where we create these standards and we use them as a tool to do some subconscious programming, because this is where the real work happens. Once you have your standards, okay, there's two ways. You have your current standards and you've got your future standards. And I want you to ask the same question on both of those standards. So first you're going to start with your low standards, okay? This is where you have to be really honest with yourself. You're going to write the question down, why do I have these low standards? Why are these low standards important to me, my current standards? Because once you do that digging, you will find out why you have them, which is very important to become aware of. You don't just become aware of the tangible standards that you have in your life, but you start becoming aware of why they are in your life. What is the subconscious programming that created those low standards in the first place, okay? So again, this is all reverse engineering to go deeper inside, because that's what we want to do. The same question you are going to ask on the future standards, on the standards that your best version has. You're going to ask the question, why are these standards important to me? Because that will solidify, will cement these new standards into your life, into your subconscious, in your brain, and that will help you to recalibrate to that new standard. This will help you with staying consistent. This will give you a very strong why when things get tough, because there will be moments when your standards will be challenged, when you will be challenged in your journey to raise those standards. Your old identity is going to fight and pull back, because again, it wants to keep you familiar, it wants to keep you safe, it wants to keep you in the comfortable. But once you understand why you are doing these things, again, that creates so much of that clear direction that you can then move towards to, and that will help you to kind of, in the moment when sometimes the pressure gets high and it's so easy to just fall back into those old standards because they feel comfortable, right? To then just make that hard decision because we have such a strong reason why we want to become this person, why these standards are important. And that's the thing. That is how I was able to raise my standards, raise my standard of living, raise my frequency, become the guy that I am now, become the best version of myself that I am now, is because I had such a strong reason. And I got pulled back so many times into my old identity, but then I would just have this big, massive why in front of me that would just make it so much easier to just say, well, I'm going to say no to that, I'm going to do this, right? And that is what most people miss. That's what most people lack in their lives, and this is why they fall back into these old patterns. Nietzsche said this really well. He who has a strong why can bear almost any how. And that is exactly what you're doing here as well. Now, here's a very important thing that you will notice once you raise your standards, because standards are not isolated. Once you raise one of your standards, everything in your life will shift. Everything in your life will shift with that as well. So it's like a domino effect, basically. What I want you to do is I want you to raise your baseline. Your standards are, another word for it is baseline. And your nervous system and your identity will recalibrate with that. So you're actively leading yourself to a higher standard, and your identity and your nervous system will recalibrate to that same level, and it will pull everything with it. Because once you become disciplined in one area of your life, once you raise your standard in one area of your life, it becomes very illogical not to have your other standards to raise with that. So for example, if you raise your physical standard, it becomes very, very easy to become more disciplined in the weekends as well, because most people fuck up in the weekends. They go drink, they eat, they go out for dinners and this and that, because they have been used to having a social life and they've been used to this. It's very normal, right? It's in your programming. But once you have a very strong reason not to do those things, you can still go out and have a nice dinner, but you will watch yourself. You won't drink, you won't do any crazy stuff, you'll take care of your sleep, you will be in bed earlier. So one standard can raise every single frequency in the rest of your life as well if you just keep consistent with it. And the beautiful thing about this is that once you do this, then discipline stops becoming a fight. Consistency stops taking so much effort, but they become byproducts of your standards, become a new baseline. And this is why, for example, that I found this myself as well. Maybe you recognize this in other areas. Let's say that you're a very successful entrepreneur, you've made a lot of money. You look at people who are struggling with making money in a way where it's like, well, it's very easy because your baseline has risen to a certain level where making money is just not hard anymore. So you can raise that same baseline in different areas of your life. And if you are already very jacked, for example, then you look at people who are not very jacked and you just see the difference in discipline and you see the difference in character and identity. For you, it's normal to have a certain baseline of being healthy and being jacked. And for them, it's like this massive thing because they're struggling with other things that are keeping them from becoming that person. So this is how you raise your frequency, you raise your standards, you raise your baseline of living. And once you do this, once you raise those standards, the beautiful thing with this is that you will raise your entire frequency. Your creativity will come back. Your energy will come back. Your confidence will come back. Why? Because you will start living like the person that you want to become. You will start living like the best version of yourself. This is what we call alignment. This is what we call congruent living. And that creates space, because all of that, oh, I need to do this, and all of this space and mental space that you've been exerting on feeling like shit and like, oh, I need to do something, but I'm not really doing it, that all goes away. And then a lot of free time opens up, a lot of clarity comes into your life, and that opens up new opportunities to become more creative, to express yourself in ways that you've never really done before. And that eventually creates a very fulfilling life as well, which makes you much happier because you're not spending energy pretending to be someone that you're not. You're not pretending, you're not lying to fill up some sort of gap. You just are the person that you say you are. And that, my friend, creates a lot of peace inside and creates a lot of self-respect and a lot of confidence. So guys, that is it for this video. This is probably one of the best exercises that I have discovered in order to change your identity using standards as a tool, because it is a domino effect. It will create the right routines, it will create the right habits, it will just raise the floor of living, and that will affect everything else in your life. So you don't get what you want in life, but you get what you tolerate. And most people right now, they're tolerating bullshit. This video will help you. I'll promise you that if you complete these exercises that I've given you, if you do this, you will not be able to live the same way, because you become so extremely aware that every single time that you feel this pull back into old vices or feel this pull to go back to old patterns, you will notice it and it will make you think twice. And this is what creates this space between impulse and decision. And you have this little moment of reflection that you can make a different decision. And that is very important in order to change your identity. Because again, your brain doesn't talk about goals. It doesn't focus on goals. It focuses on what is familiar. It focuses on patterns. And if you create this as a pattern for long enough time, then you will change your identity and you will become the best version of yourself. So Let me know what you think of this, guys. Let me know if this is something that helps. If you have any questions about these exercises, just drop a comment. If you have any questions about identity change, shoot me a message on Instagram. And if you really want to become the best version of yourself, if you want to be more consistent, you want to be more disciplined, you want to create more purpose, live in alignment, feel more fulfilled, create more direction in life, stop with all the bullshit, live authentically, true to yourself, and be able to express yourself, not really care about what other people think, just live as the best fucking version of you, then you can work with me one-on-one. Click the link below. We'll have a chat. We'll see what we can do. And guys, I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.